Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7. It does feel like these are going a little bit too fast, but hey, it's all good. We're getting on really well. So, episode 7 is with Loren Hiller, and she's the commercial officer at the Marine Stewardship Council. We're just going to refer to it as MSC moving forward because it's too much to say all the time. We had a really good conversation about the mission of the MSC. Loren was really open and nothing was off limits, but it's worth noting that if the question was out of her purview or her role or not the MSC's role, then she just answered it in her personal capacity, and I think that was really good of her because she didn't want to not answer questions, so I give her a lot of credit there. As a point of reference, this was recorded the day before the Fish and Chip Awards, and we'd like to say a big well done to Tim and Kelly Barnes on winning the Independent Fish and Chips of the Year award by Seafish. They're fantastic people and run a great business. I have nothing but respect and admiration for them. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and like Loren said, if you have any questions, reach out to any time. I, for one, would love to hear all of your opinions on our conversation. Thanks for your time today, Loren.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming down to MSC. It's great to have you.
No, it's great to be here because I love London. And,
it's a good city.
Yeah, well, it's the best, isn't it?
It's the best in the world, yeah.
And obviously, we're here for the Fish and Chip Awards tomorrow, so it just made complete sense. So,
yes, very good timing.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think we've had this we've been doing this for like 2 months, we tried, I think, give or take.
Yeah, because we met a while back now.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of summertime. I remember it being quite warm. Was it warm or... It was slightly warm. I think
was
it
it
was
the
in
Norway
September.
Day thing?
It was our Sustainable Friday with Miller's Fish and Chips.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
So that was a while back now. I think that was September. So we've had this in the pipeline for a while now, which, I've been waiting. I've been counting down the days till I've been on this podcast.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure you just couldn't sleep.
I know, I couldn't.
So one thing I wanted to get this started, I do this with everyone, so it was just like, tell us a little bit about how you got here, like how you got to MSC, your journey.
Yep, so I think, I can't remember where it all started. I mean, I grew up in South London, nowhere near the sea. I never really had any family who spent time near the sea, so I can't claim I've got that sort of story. But when I was younger, I was fascinated by the ocean, science, biology. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to do something marine biology. And I had that, in my sights for a long time. So, my mum's a PE teacher and my sister's a physio, and everyone said to me, oh, are you going to be a coach or a sports teacher? I was like, most definitely not. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can run up and down a lacrosse pitch if I wanted to, but I always wanted to do something sciencey. So I went to University of Portsmouth in 2012 and did marine biology and graduated in 2015. And I previously worked for a marine technology company, but I always had MSC in my sights. I've always been passionate about what they do and what they stand for. So now I've been working for the MSC for about a year and a half now, and I really enjoy it. Work with some very like-minded people who really do care. So it's a really nice environment to work in. Okay,
so now you've got us to that point. Tell us just the mission. What's the mission? The mission of MSC.
So, I mean, we want the world's oceans teeming with life and seafood supplies safeguarded for this and future generations. So through our fishery standard and through our chain of custody standard, we want to drive that change. We want to see more sustainable seafood in the market, in restaurants, in supermarkets, and we want to see fishermen and fisherwomen changing the way they fish, so they can fish sustainably and fish forever as well, because it is people's livelihoods at the end of the day. So that's what we ultimately care about, and we're all very passionate about following our mission and our vision.
You've done this before, haven't you?
No.
So
maybe.
I rang around a little bit because I know a little bit about what MSC does, and I believe in the mission. There's no doubt, and I think everyone that I spoke to really does believe in the mission, and I think they love it, and they love what you're doing, and I think that it's good for me to learn a little bit about this side of it.
Yeah,
really.
So let me ask you a question. How much do you know about the MSC? I mean, what do you think the blue label stands for? I mean, you're kind of in the industry already.
So I know that for me, if we're talking about retail, when I see the blue label, I don't see that as a mark of quality. I see it as a mark of sustainability.
Yes.
that's probably been something that I've always found a bit contentious sometimes, because I think that some people or some organisations try and pass it off as better quality.
Yes.
In terms of taste, flavour, texture and all that. Whereas I don't strictly think that's the case. And however, if it's more sustainable, then that's always better.
Yes.
So am I right to think that's what it is?
Yes, so obviously the blue label that you see, or maybe in a restaurant, or on your fillets of cod in the supermarket, essentially mean that fish has come from a sustainable fishery and is fully traceable. So you can trace it back to where it's come from. So you're right in saying that it's all about sustainability. For some consumers, they just don't know. They see that blue label and they think it means something good.
Yeah.
And so we're on that journey now of educating consumers, so they can understand what it actually means. Because when you're busy and you hop into a supermarket, ultimately you just want to get your dinner and go home. But if we can make it convenient for shoppers and consumers, when they're eating out, that this is a good thing, it means that my fish is sustainable and I'm doing the right thing, then that's a dream, really.
So I know this doesn't fall under your remit, but how do you stop people from pushing it from a quality point of view as opposed to a sustainable point of view, or even both? How do you do that?
Well, I think ultimately when you see that blue badge on on the packets or in the restaurants, it will say certified sustainable seafood. So, and on every packet of seafood which has the label, or in a menu where you see the label, there's a link to our website. And so we encourage people to look at the website to see what it actually stands for. So that's where people come onto the website and see, okay, this isn't about taste or quality, it's about sustainable seafood.
And do you think busy consumers do that? Do you think?
I think people who care do.
Yeah.
I think in the light of, David Attenborough and the whole plastics in the ocean situation, that really brought to light that we're in a bad way at the moment. And I think people are starting to realise that they need to make change.
So I think we touched on this just before. Your budget is, no, not your budget, your turnover as an NGO is 19 million or something?
I think something around that, yeah.
How do you manage, and all the money doesn't go to obviously promotion, obviously.
No.
How do you manage to deal with the fads? Because people watch that plastic show,
yes.
the David Attenborough show. Was it Planet Earth or something?
Yeah, Blue Planet or
Blue Planet, one of
those.
And people get very all up in it. Oh my God, I can't have plastic straws, da-da-da. And then a month later, they're onto something else. It's Veganuary.
It's a trend, isn't it?
Veganuary, whatever you call it. And it's a trend. How do you, as a broadly speaking, how do you deal with that at MSC?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're on a journey of educating consumers, and the year before was our 20th anniversary. And since then, we've sort of changed the way we market ourselves to be a bit more consumer friendly, because if people think of the MSC, they do think, science heavy, kind of boring. I mean, standards can be, don't get me wrong. If you get into the depths of it, it can be very heavy. So what we do is a change in the way we look and how we market ourselves. We're working with brands, we're working with retailers, and we do lots of consumer engagement campaigns as well. So to change the perception of the MSC. And we also do a lot of market research as well. So every 2 years we do a big study to show us, what do people think of the label and how their perceptions are changing. So year on year, we're seeing higher recognition of the label, people actually understanding what it means. And from there, we can develop our messaging and create assets that, I guess, lure people into what is sustainability and what is sustainable fish. So that's how we're changing our way.
Because ideally, you want people to be thinking about sustainably sourced fish all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, as opposed to, it's good now, and But I think we'll get into a little bit down the line defining the word sustainability, because I've got some questions about that as well. But I've done a little bit of research, and not a lot. But so I found a quote from, I think I've sent you this as well.
Yes.
Erin Priddle, MSC's UK Programme Director.
Yes.
Is she in this building?
She's not in the building.
God.
No.
I'd just go and find her right now and say,
I her up.
So she says, the report, then this is a report she was talking about,
yes.
Reflects the complex, often polarised views around seafood certification. While some claim the bar is too low, others warn that it is becoming too high, even for world-leading fisheries. This illustrates the challenge of a global standard. If the bar is raised too high, it risks preventing fisheries, such as small-scale and developing world fisheries, from ever reaching that bar.
Yeah.
How do you, as an NGO, how do you balance between that?
Right, so I've spoken to Erin about this. So after you sent me that quote, I wanted to get her opinion on it as well.
And I think she was referring to MCS they were. I think the article that it was in reference to was MCS. Or
I think it was the Environmental Audit Committee. Yeah, so that was the report which we were one of the organisations, actually the only NGO which was investigated in the Sustainable Seas report. And so what that quote essentially means is that some stakeholders don't think that the MSC standard is actually high enough. And we should be aiming for even higher, for some sort of gold standard that is only attainable by, maybe 1% of the fisheries. But those same people also say that the MSC acts as a barrier to small-scale fisheries. But it is these precise fisheries that need a lower bar so that entry to the programme is more attainable. But it's very difficult to sort of find a medium of all these conflicting views and for the MSC to be all things to all fisheries, because it's simply not possible. But what essentially the fishery standard does is offer a scoring system which enables fisheries to enter the programme, and they can meet a minimum score, and with the minimum score there's sometimes conditions placed on the score, which means they need to make improvements over a certain time period. So at the moment we think we have this right, but it's important to remember that sustainable fisheries are on a journey. So fisheries do enter the programme and they do need to make changes and make improvements. And hopefully, one step at a time, we're trying to eradicate unsustainable fishing. So that's what that quote means. I mean, it's hard to please everyone.
No,
we can't be everything to everyone. And we regularly review our standards. We welcome input from stakeholders and industry, and we regularly review what we're doing so we can be, the best of its kind, which we currently are.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And so a couple of things. I know you can't answer everything on behalf of MSC. I get that completely. So you're going to have to jump into your personal opinion sometimes.
Yes, no worries.
So unless you want to jump out and get someone else's opinion, but I'm
guessing
who's free. So we touched on it just before. So some people would argue that legislation should push the standard.
Yes.
Yeah, and you said it's not that easy.
Yeah. I think so. What is important to state is that we are an NGO. We aren't run by the government or anything like that. So when we have done our latest consumer research, people do see us as like a government organisation, or they think we're related to the supermarkets, which isn't the case. We're a separate body. I think we do when we review the standards, we do take into account your latest scientific evidence and things that are going on outside of our MSC bubble. So that would be my opinion on that. Like I said, we improve as much as we can. If a stakeholder thinks we're not doing something right, then we'll review it and see if we can put something in place.
And I take it you guys are, as MSC, are putting recommendations forward to governments and so on. Or not really? Does it not work like that? Or
not really. I mean, they come to us for opinions and advice because we're a market leader and we're the only sort of standard of its kind. So they know that a lot of fisheries globally do adhere to our standards. So I guess we could be looked at as sort of a leader in that way. Okay.
So moving on to plastics. And again, you mentioned it earlier, everyone's sort of gone a little bit crazy over plastics. And it's everyone's fault, clearly,
It's mine and yours too.
And I read somewhere, or actually I might have even been told, that the majority of plastics in the sea come from 2 rivers in Asia.
Yes. Yeah. So I saw that study as well. I didn't realise that either. Obviously, it all gets washed in from somewhere. It goes down drains. It goes down the rivers. But so it says 90% of plastic comes from just 10 rivers in the world.
That's mad.
Which is really scary, actually.
Well, I think it also makes you think that no matter how much the British people, because we always follow rules, we're British, we follow all the rules. We recycle, we reuse, we do everything right, generally. Actually, even if we try hard, it doesn't matter because it's still ended up in the sea, isn't it?
Well, I think
to some degree. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't try.
I know. So you just mentioned like we recycle, we behave by the rules. I would put it as a sort of a 1, 2, 3. So reduce, reuse, recycle. So I mean, recycling sounds great, and don't get me wrong, I'd rather chuck my bottle in a recycling bin, like my plastic bottle, than into a river somewhere and it ends up in the ocean. But first of all, as consumers, and if we want to sort of live sustainably, we need to think about reducing. So reducing the amount of material that we use, the plastic we buy, and then reuse that stuff. So I've got my reusable bottle right here. I've got a reusable coffee cup, but I'm really into that sort of thing. And then think about recycling there, because people don't sort of underestimate how much money, energy and time goes into recycling. It's all well and good, putting your recycling out. And I think it's a good idea. But the amount of work and energy that goes into that, people don't really realise.
I genuinely think that I'm a strong supporter of doing things the right way, but I think the government and councils could really do a better job of disposing of these things. And
yes.
I think that they're still well behind the curve. I think, and they'll get there, no doubt. And there's lots there's lots of other things going off at the moment. We'll let them off. But I think that, one thing that really grinds my gears, and I put a little bit here actually, is about David Attenborough, but everyone sort of like lost their self about like the plastic straws.
Yep.
And then they all move over to paper straws. And I'm convinced that you go through more paper straws because they go soggy and they're disgusting. And I don't give me a straw.
Yes.
Quite frankly. I don't want a straw. I don't want a paper straw that's lined with plastic.
Yes.
And it goes soggy and it's disgusting. And it costs probably triple the amount to move around anyway, which means, and I think this is the problem sometimes in this country, maybe, that we jump on all of the bio fads. So for example, everyone's using biodegradable packaging that does not biodegrade.
Yes, because people don't know how to biodegrade it, or they don't have the facilities to do so.
Exactly.
But I mean, unfortunately, consumers, they see that like, oh great, I'm doing the right thing, but they're not. And ultimately, you just mentioned it there, I think it does need to come from top down. So the government needs to bring in things, because if you walk into a supermarket right now and you want to do, a few day shop or a weekly shop, you will ultimately always have plastic in your trolley.
Yeah.
And I use this example because it really annoys me. I like it as a Swede on a Sunday as one of my vegetables. It is like the hardest vegetable, and it comes in plastic packaging.
Point? Yeah.
It doesn't need to, and it's just common sense as well.
You could drop that thing in a puddle and nothing would happen.
And I feel really bad for people who are trying to do the right thing when they're swamped by all these. Sustainability is a bit of a buzzword, but what does it mean? People don't actually know what it means. So I feel sorry for people trying to do the right thing, and it's biodegradable, and it does this and it does that. But what does it do?
I actually think that half the problem is, and this is going to sound so cruel, but if you're unsure, revert back to common sense.
Yes, well...
Yeah, and I think, and I just think it makes sense. You know what? Why should I have plastic bottles of water when I can have a water filter next to a tap? Why should I buy a peeled orange that's in plastic casing when I can just have an orange with normal skin on and peel it? So that, just revert back to common sense.
Yes.
And I think, I saw someone selling one banana in a plastic thing. Well, what's the banana covered in?
You see that on social media, don't you? Like,
I don't know how
things
true those are sometimes, but it does make you wonder sometimes. Like, use your common sense. Just but we've also got to be careful sometimes, because you see massive extremes. So you see like people go into a supermarket, unloading all of their shopping, taking off all the plastic and throwing it on the floor in the supermarket. Well, that wasn't good either. Like,
I know. I mean,
I know they're trying to prove a point, but
I know. But ultimately, I think it needs to come top down, because we can sometimes be very powerless. We can we can go to a farmer's market, or we can do other things. We can buy things in bulk rather than individual mini things, for example. But ultimately, if we want to make change, it needs to come top down. Otherwise,
it's not going to happen.
We can't. We're sometimes powerless, I think.
Yeah, you need numbers. And
yes.
If one person decides to, make a change, well done, mate. But if 10 do it, you got a better chance.
And we don't want to get to the point where we're too late as well, which I think
I think everyone's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, when you walk around the food exhibitions, and you have to ask them like 3 or 4 times, is this compostable? Yes, of course it is. No. Is it compostable? Like, can I put it in my green bin? Oh, no, you can't do that. And you're like, oh, okay then. So what do I do with it? And they're like, and I don't know if you heard the Andrew Cook podcast. And I said to him, a friend of mine has put a biodegradable fish and chip tray in his garden. It's been there 6 years and it's still there. I spoke to him last week. It's still there. Yeah. It's just like, what the hell? So I think that a lot of people moved over to this packaging for good reason, but we are generally being duped by people.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, it's a trend as well.
Yeah,
you think, oh, they're doing biodegradable cups, I should do that too. But people don't really look into it. For example, this is a bit of a off-piece story. My sister got a dog recently. And I was like, all right, Amy, you need to get, sustainable pet food. What about biodegradable doggy bags, when you're out and about with the dog? And I had to look into it. And, these, you can get biodegradable, compostable, but unless you have the right facilities, then where does it go? It just ends up in the bin, or it just ends up in your garden or down a drain.
I'm guessing dog poo's pretty acidic, so get rid of that anyway, to be honest. But you're right. It is so true. Like, we have not got those facilities. So all the trends are there. but we've just not got the facilities.
Yes.
And then you read an article that actually says polystyrene is probably the best packaging in terms of recycling, because you can wash it, squash it down, and get it flaked up, and it works again. And you're like, oh, great, we're going full circle. So I don't like polystyrene personally, but, it's just got that kebab shop image, hasn't it?
And what about your batters? What sort of packaging are they in? How are you have you changed your ways?
No, we didn't have to. So when we sourced them in the first place, we just did it right the first time. And, that just took a lot of research. So we have paper bags from recycled sources, and they've been re-cleaned and reused. And they're fully recyclable again. So we don't have plastic lining, so they can just get recycled. Roll it up, put it in the paper bin.
Yep.
So, our plastic tubs that we use are reusable, and they're from recycled sources, and they're recyclable. So, we're always constantly looking at that. It never stops. And we did some research recently, and some customers were like, we love the plastic tubs because we reuse them so many times. They're white originally, and you go to some shops and they've been battered and bruised, and they just keep using them. They're clean. And some people use them to put potatoes in or whatever it may be. So I think it's just getting that right message out there.
Yes.
And again, we could have moved over to, let's say, in commas, more biodegradable packaging. But you know what? I don't think it would have been that biodegradable, because again, who gets rid of it, and so it just throws in more headache, really. So we just try to keep it simple.
Yes.
And we're always reviewing these options. Some customers that listen to this will know, because I'll text them and say, look, what do you think? And we'll run through it. So I think one thing that we probably want to do at some point is move away from black plastic, because we know that that's probably the worst plastic.
And I think, I've been speaking to suppliers. They're trying to get away from that as well. I didn't realise how bad it was.
No, because black plastic apparently is just all the crap of what's left from all the other ones that have just been cleaned. But at least, again, it goes back to the fact that everything's being reused. All of our tubs, I'm almost putting money on the fact that all of our tubs are getting reused, all of them. I'd say only a small amount of people are putting them in the bin, and then even then they're putting them to one side and they're getting recycled.
Yes.
But I know one customer texted me the other day. He goes, I can't use them anymore, so I put a sign up in the shop. I've got too many, he says. So I put a sign up in the shop, and then gardeners took them to allotments, and
Brilliant.
they were using them. So there's they're getting used, and I think that's the really interesting thing, is that I remember. When I was younger, I'd grown up in Cyprus, and I only did a year over there. And my grandparents, they used to use all the plastic buckets to put plants in.
Yes.
Well, nowadays we don't, because everyone's so quick to go get nice plant pots.
I know.
Yeah, and you think, I think the older generation maybe had a lot more care about reusing.
I mean, people didn't have as much money as we do now,
No.
so they had to reuse things, and they were very frugal about what they were using, what they were buying, and the same with food as well.
Yeah.
Food waste.
Well, never throw food away, did they? Let's face it, never.
Well, some people do. They do a massive weekly shop, and then half of it goes
in the
really.
bin.
So
Not with seafood, they don't. It's
no,
too expensive.
not.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So moving forward, because we could talk about that all day. Sustainability. The word sustainability. I know you guys define it as, essentially, I've got point 2 here from your website, and
Yes.
I know there's more to it, 'cause there's 3 points, isn't there?
Yes.
So I picked out this one, and it's minimising the environmental impact. What are the impacts? Fishing activity must be managed carefully so that other species and habitats within the ecosystem remain healthy.
Yes.
Do you consider other aspects to sustainability? Like, for example, and I put them underneath, ship emissions and waste, sustainable source, but what about plastic sheets in the slabs? I know that's not your remit again, but, and then I recently read a not so old article about Mitch Tonks advocating the sustainability of dayboat versus fish from the other side of the world. Are MSC doing more to make use of dayboat fish? What is MSC's view on this? So there's a few points there. So if we start on
I know I've got a lot of questions to answer there.
Okay, so if we start on...
So I'll start about sort of our sustainability in our fisheries. So it all starts with fisheries. That's how the MSC begins its journey, let's say. So you have a fishery and it voluntarily enters assessment, and they're assessed against 3 different principles. The first one is sustainable fish stocks. So essentially, are there enough fish left in the ocean? Can they continue fishing at a level which is maintainable, and that populations can remain healthy? So they're assessed against that principle. The second one is minimising environmental impact. So what are the impacts the fishing vessel or the fishery is having on the environment? And any fishing activity that does take place must be managed carefully. So that's to make sure that other habitats don't get caught up in the trouble as well. And then the last one is effective fisheries management. So what that essentially means is a fishery that is complying to relevant laws. So say if your country brings in a law about X, Y, or Z, you must comply to that law. So in terms of sustainability, so that means leaving enough fish left in the ocean. That's how we would define sustainability. And it means that these fishermen who are fishing, they're going out to work, they can do so whilst respecting habitats and ensuring people's lives who depend on fishing can maintain their livelihoods. Because fishing obviously is about the fish, but it's also a livelihood for many people. Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure where the stat is, around 12% of the world's population rely on fisheries and aquaculture for their livelihood. So it doesn't seem much, but it is quite a lot. Again? 12%.
Okay, wow.
So it is still quite a lot. Yeah. And that's not just the fisheries as well. That does cover, processing and markets, etc.
That's more people than land farming.
Yeah. So it's quite a high stat. Yeah. So that's how we would define sustainability. And a fishery can be assessed, regardless of its size or where it is or its fishing method. So we allow any fishery with any fishing method except sort of explosives. That's a no-no.
What about dragging?
So dredging.
That's it.
So dredging's allowed. Okay. We don't sort of reject any gear type, but it must be done in a way which doesn't affect the habitat.
I thought that was a really invasive way, like dragging all the seabed.
Well, it depends on what they're fishing for. And this is monitored very carefully. And a fishery wouldn't be allowed, a dredge fishery wouldn't be allowed in the programme if it was dragging up half the ocean with it. We don't sort of not let anyone come in. And the sustainability of a fishery is also an ongoing process. So I mentioned earlier, they come into the programme and they have to meet a minimum score. And if they don't meet the maximum on some scores, there's conditions placed on these. And that means essentially making improvements. So let's say a fishery has a high mortality rate of seabirds when they're fishing. There must be ways to reduce that. So there was a South African hake fishery which had problems with a high mortality of seabirds, and they brought that down to 1% of what it previously was. It was a very high percentage. So it's an ongoing process, and so that would cover the fisheries side of things. That's how we define sustainability in fisheries.
And what about ship emissions, waste, etc.? So
we're not adverse to eventually reviewing that. So we have had feedback that people want to look at sort of carbon emissions and things like that. That's not something we currently cover. Hopefully in our future fishery standards reviews we will do. But it's not something we cover. So someday in the future, hopefully as well.
Okay. And then, so obviously plastics in slabs. Obviously, again, you don't touch that aspect. No. But I'm guessing there's a little bit of common sense there if that could be reduced.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I was in Norway in September with the top 10 finalists of the National Fish and Chip Awards, which was an amazing trip. And so we were on board the Romoen in Norway. And it's an MSC certified vessel, part of the Norwegian fishery. They fish for cod and haddock mainly. And I couldn't believe the amount of plastic that was put into the boxes. It's fillet, layer of plastic, fillet, layer of plastic. And I was like, So it's, again, something that we don't currently cover. But
it clearly has a use. We're not saying they're just doing it for the sake of it. It clearly has a use.
Yes.
But it just makes you wonder if there's another alternative.
I was chatting to someone a while back, and I can't remember the exact details, but he said to me someone was looking into alternative sort of packaging for fishing. So using the shell of crustaceans that's been broken down and then re-put together.
It's probably worse. Yeah.
But it can be broken down.
It sounds sexy though, doesn't it?
It sounds very cool.
So that's what it is,
Something like that. I mean, there must be an alternative way. Again, there's probably like the biodegradable or whatever.
They could just use wax paper.
Yeah. Have you heard of those beeswax wraps?
No.
So there's a way, it's like a concept to reduce plastic. So alternative to like cling film and like tin foil, they're like made out of beeswax. And they keep things really fresh, and it's just a way to reduce your plastic use. I'd look it up if you've ever seen it. I've got some at home; they're very good.
Okay, I'll have a look at that.
Alternative ways, that's what we need to look into.
So, what about the Mitch Tonks thing? Not that it's him all over, but what do you think about dayboat fish? Like, is there something you guys could do to allow for that, or do you?
I mean, we only say a fishery is sustainable if it's entered the programme and gone through the assessment. We don't really give our opinion on other fisheries unless we really wanted to. But that's not to say that local can't be sustainable. So there's a Cornish hake fishery that was certified a few years back now, so 2015. And that's made up of a very small fishery, and some of them are day boats. And that's like local and sustainable. So we don't say no to like day boats. And that's a good example of a very small local fishery. Another example would be a recently certified Poole Harbour clam and cockle fishery. So that's a very small fishery, very small boats as well. I think they call them like canoe boats. And again, there's local and it's sustainable. But there are massive fishing fleets that go really far out for a long time, and they're sustainable as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
I'm sort of, sorry to butt in. I'm sort of guessing that we'll get into it a little bit lower, but I'm sort of guessing that it's more longliners that jump in because of the investment that's needed, maybe, and all of that, the costs involved for MSC certification at that level.
Yeah, I think there is obviously a cost to certification. It can be expensive, and that would probably be considered a barrier to entry. Yeah. But I mean, we work with the industry. So there's a project called PUCFI, which stands for Project UK Fisheries Improvements.
Okay.
And that's a programme we facilitate with industry and stakeholders. And what it essentially does, it looks at fisheries across the UK, which are demanded by the market. They're in high demand, but they're not currently certified sustainable. So we facilitate these programmes, and what the aim of the programme is to use the MSC programme to drive improvements in these fisheries. So we're supported by the supply chain, retailers and NGOs, and we focus on commercially important species. And I think the fisheries, they're at very low level now, so they wouldn't be ready for the MSC programme. But working with the industry, who would love these species, in their supply chain, we're working with them to bring them up to a standard where they could be certified sustainable, and there are actions put in place, maybe there needs more catch data, or it might be something to do with the gear type. And I think that's really important, that because we love British fish, so if we can have more UK British fisheries, that would be great. I mean, we're quite lucky in the UK that we've got a lot of UK fisheries. You've got the big fleet up in Scotland, the cod, the haddock, the hake, then you've got Poole Harbour clam and cockles and Cornish hake, and you've got Irish mussels, and we're very lucky like that.
Very good. Okay, and I think a lot of the time these local fisheries, the UK fisheries, they don't tend to do the MSC certification. They'll always say that, well, not all, but they'll say it's too much. The barrier to entry is too high. So I wonder, as we get a bit further on down, we can talk about that and see if they could ever be sort of included somehow.
Yes.
But obviously I put a question saying a discard's still an issue because there were a few years ago, but you said that there's a lot of sort of movement on that at the moment, and you couldn't comment yet because you haven't been given guidance. So.
Yeah, so I mean, we know that the discard ban is coming in and there's a landing obligations in place. We have been working with industry. So Erin, who you quoted earlier, she held sort of a workshop, I think it was in Berlin or somewhere in Europe, to discuss what would happen. I mean, I'm not fully briefed on it, so I wouldn't go into my proper opinion, but it is a problem, and it will be a challenge for fishermen and the industry as well.
And I definitely, I think I said to you before we started recording that I think that that topic, there's always going to be winners and losers. There's always going to be people that are upset with the fact that, and it's the tricky one because, common sense tells you that you shouldn't put good fish back in the water that's dead.
Yes.
And then, but the fact is that's got to come off a quota. So there's going to be people that aren't going to be happy with that, whatever we say.
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a faff. That's a bit of palaver, really.
Yeah.
But we're working as hard as we can to support the fisheries and how that, because fisheries that are in the programme, this discard ban will affect them in the programme in some way or another.
Yeah. And actually, it segues onto the topic I want to talk about next, which is people eating different types of fish.
Yes.
And actually, it's worth noting that some of the fish that's getting thrown back in, nobody would have ate in the first place.
Whoa, yeah.
So, if it's not sexy, no one wants to sort of sell it, do they?
No.
Which is unfortunate, because I think I found that it's still the predominant fish that are sold at home is still salmon and tuna at home, isn't it?
And and the cod and the haddock as well.
So it's those that are just up there, aren't they, all the time?
Exactly. So we work with, my main work involves working with fish and chip shops.
Yeah.
And they're just wonderful people to work with. They're so passionate. And where we can, we try and support them in, selling different alternative
Yeah.
species. Because, don't get me wrong, if I go into a fish and chip shop, I'm going to have cod or I'm going to have haddock. And I went up to Miller's Fish and Chips, I think, at least 6 months ago now. And we were giving out free samples of Cornish hake to people who were coming into the shop. And some people have never tried hake before.
Cornish hake's amazing.
And it's delightful. And people are like, wow, it's amazing. Can you get this in the supermarket? And we're like, yeah, you can get it in the supermarket. But people are just stuck in their ways. And I think, we try and push it as much as we can. Like I mentioned earlier, there are so many fisheries around the UK that people can utilise from. So you've got the clam and cockles. Those small clam and cockles are being used in a local fish and chip shop just down the road.
Yeah.
And they're promoting that as a different dish to your usual fish and chips. Kingfisher Fish and Chips in Plymouth, they have a very extensive menu. They've got, they had lobster, they've got crab, I think, coley, pollock. Where you can, I would suggest trying to promote species, maybe give out free samples. I mean, if you're cooking things fresh, you can chuck something else in the fryer and just give out free samples to people, and then that might change their opinion.
And I think, in my mind, some of the problem is that if you think seafood's expensive, well, the alternatives that we usually give for cod and haddock are generally just as expensive. So I wonder if that makes people less what's the word? Less chance of trying something different, let's say, whereas if they were doing something like coley, and I don't know if coley is sustainable, I'm just throwing a fish out there.
There is a certified coley fishery, so it's very sustainable.
Yeah. So if someone's doing coley and they can offer it at a better price, and it's a lower barrier to entry, isn't it? The customer could try it, and let's say it's a quarter of the price of cod.
Yes.
No, not quarter, a quarter off the price. Yeah. So people can try it and not feel like, oh yeah, my money's being wasted.
Yes.
And I do wonder if that's the way to go, where we can offer better value with different species, and then they get trying different things. Coley's not so different to cod.
It's a white fish.
Yeah.
It's flaky. And
like
it's
the
not that
taste,
expensive, and it's very sustainable.
It's cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, it represents amazing value. And I think, looking at kingfishers, and not to single them out because you mentioned them. I know some people in the industry would argue that, them, not just them, but lots of people like them, getting lots of different fish from all over the world isn't probably as sustainable as what it should be.
Well, I mean, no, you're right. Flying things in is not great, but there are so many UK British fisheries.
Yeah.
So you've got hake, place, whiting, cod, haddock, coley, clams and cockles, mussels, scallops.
There's just an abundance.
Exactly. And local can be sustainable. We want people to you sell British fish and eat British fish because we have so much of it and it's delicious as well. And we should also reward the fishermen and the people put the practices in place to bring the sustainable fisheries into the programme. Like North Sea cod, however many years ago it was at the brink of collapse, and it dropped to under half of what we eat, of what we would consume in the UK. And what the North Sea cod fishery has come back into the programme and is certified sustainable now. So local can be sustainable.
And you can still, we always tell people you can still eat cod and haddock and not feel guilty.
Yes.
Whether consumers actually feel guilty or not, I don't know. But we always say that. Everyone uses that line. You can eat it without feling guilty.
Yes.
I actually think most of the time people eat their cod and chips and don't even think twice.
They're hungry.
Yeah, they're just hungry. They want to eat. They've had a long day. They just want to eat. And so I do think that, I mean, a lot of my customers serve lots of different fish, but the majority will be just doing cod and haddock.
Yes.
But that's just the way the industry's been for 150 years as well. So you can't blame them for that either. Well, no, not you. I mean, generally.
Yes. When you think of fish and chips, you think of cod. Down south where I'm from, it's more cod. I never tried haddock until I went up north, and it changed my life. It was wonderful. But it's just changing perceptions because up until a year ago, I actually didn't eat fish. So I grew up with my mum would cook me fish, and I used to hate it. Maybe it was the way she cooked it. So if she listened to this, I'm very sorry, Mum. But it got to the point where I was like, I can't take it anymore. Stop giving me this fish. And I just got into a bit of a mindset that, oh no, all fish is disgusting. And since starting at the MSC, I've explored so many different species, and it just changed my way. I think you just be brave, because I was the fussiest food eater ever, but now I will eat any fish I can get hold of.
I think the tolerance of cooking fish is the error for margin is really small, and I think home cooks, especially, your mum were probably the generation that could cook still, and we're in a generation of people today that don't cook as much.
Yeah, people don't know how to cook fish.
Yeah, it's daunting, and it's really expensive. It's, at the supermarket, it's probably a similar price to steak, let's say.
Yes.
So, but a steak, if you ever cook it for 30 seconds, 40 seconds, it's not going to be the end of your meal. Whereas with fish, it is.
And I think what people do is they overcook fish, and they don't know how to cook it well, and then it tastes disgusting, and it puts them off.
Yeah, and I don't blame them, but I think it's weird because this country will got cooking shows on every 5 minutes, yet nobody can cook.
No, and people are so lazy, they get the recipe boxes, which, don't get me wrong, I think they're a good idea for people who are so busy. But, there's programs on where people just I don't know how to make a white sauce, or I can only cook beans on toast. How can you only cook beans on toast? I don't think it's that hard.
It's not cooking though, is it?
It's not, no.
Assembling.
Stirring it in the pot.
So if you get that wrong, something's wrong.
I just think, my advice would be brave. I was brave. And now I eat a lot of fish and chips.
Yeah.
And fish, grilled fish, fried fish, name it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I think I'm from Cyprus. Well, my family's from Cyprus, and it's all seafood. Everything you eat generally, it's really nice. There's restaurants that are literally on the beach. They walk in with the octopus. It's amazing. It's just so fresh. But we don't. Yeah, I say we don't get it that much over here. But then I live in the Midlands, so I'm not going to see that much.
Yes, and also we mentioned earlier we mainly eat the big five, so you're not really going to see the nice variety that you would get in Cyprus, because
no, of course
we
not,
only demand the boring stuff.
Is there any? I know it's probably the same with chicken, that people just want boneless and skinless. I get that. But is there any sort of campaigns at MSC, or do you work closely with any other organisation to get people eating the not big five, a different?
So I think that the people that handle that would be Seafish. They do their seafood week, and they obviously encourage people to eat, I think it's 2 portions of fish a week at least.
That's right. Yeah.
And the majority of people in the UK do not get that close, I'll admit.
Tuna, I bet, is definitely one of those, isn't it?
Yeah, tin tuna. That, I'll be honest, that's not for me.
Yeah.
But so they're really good at promoting that, and that's what they that's their thing, and we'll go for it as well. And where we can,
you support it.
We support it if we can, And if we're talking to fish and chip shops or industry, we'll say to them, do you know how many different species there are out there that you can try?
There's only 2 in fish and chip shops.
No,
to be fair, there's obviously. To be fair, if you get to London, you've got skate, and I know that's not. Well, what do they serve instead of now? Is it ray wing? There's another one that's sustainable, isn't there? I can't remember what it is. Well, there was on MCS website.
Oh, okay. Well, we're not the MCS.
and I was supposed that's the other thing. Like, sometimes there is different advice, isn't there? So that might confuse people. A little bit.
I know. That's the confusion. We're very similar acronyms.
Yeah.
But
and they're a bit poorer than you guys as well.
Well, I can't comment on that. But my advice would be look for the bluefish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. But and also, if that's not there, just be more varied as well. Just eat different fish.
And as well, rather than just serving it in batter, why not try a fish cake? Or serving it a different way.
Well, I love people doing fish cakes. I sell a fish cake mix. So,
let's all buy his fish cake mix.
But no, what I mean more so is I've always said for years, the way to reduce portion size, because that's a really big issue at the moment, is that if you trim the tail, trim the belly, you've got some little bits and bobs of fish that will go make fish cakes. You've got second revenue stream from that. So that's something we've always pushed. And I think also fish portion sizes have probably gone a little bit high over the So
I was speaking to Andrew Crook yesterday.
Someone has to.
Yeah, someone. Hi, Andrew. And we were talking about things that are coming in place that reduce. They're going to have to eventually put calories on the menu and reducing portion sizes. And I do think it's important because people do overeat. If I get fish and chips with my mum, we have to share a bit of fish because I physically cannot eat that massive bit of fish. Well, I probably could, but we have to share it because my local chippy doesn't offer a smaller size.
No.
And sometimes, of an evening, I might just fancy a small bit of fish and chips. And I think it's great when shops do offer the light bite, small bit of chip, small portion of chips and the fish as well. I think that's wonderful. And I think we should be doing more of that in the industry.
I think so. No, definitely. I think because something's going to, I think at some point we're going to hit a bit of a brick wall with prices. So,
yes.
Yeah. Well, if we haven't already, I think, but no, definitely. I think portion sizes need to be a bit more sensible.
Yes.
But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that fish and chips needs to remain value for money for the consumer.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, it's a working man's meal. I genuinely believe that some people will think twice about getting Chinese but I think fish and chips, people don't generally think twice.
I think fish and chips, what you're getting is reasonably priced. I mean, sometimes if you go to a very, very posh place, it's, I know I can get it for a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
I know what you mean with Chinese. It can be so expensive. Fish and chips, I don't really bat an eyelid.
No.
I know I've noticed prices go up, but that's only natural.
Yeah.
And it really gets to me when people complain about the price of fish and chips. You're getting, normally a very high quality bit of fish, some really great chips. They're probably sustainably sourced potatoes as well. And you think about the work that goes into it. They've got to run a shop and they've got to do X, Y, and Z. People don't really think about the bigger picture.
No. I think most consumers just think that the average fish and chip shop owner rolls out of bed at 11:15 to open at 11:30. And I think, and that's always, I think, an issue. Like, have you watched, what is it? It's on BBC. I watched it yesterday for the first time. It's where people pitch to restaurant investors.
Oh, £1 million menu.
That's it.
I love that programme.
And they were I was talking about it this morning because it only come to my attention yesterday. And I'm late to these things. And
late on the trend.
Yeah, late on the trend. And they were saying that, they love noodles and they love rice because it costs like 20p to put a bowl of food together, but you're selling it for £6-7. Whereas with fish and chips, well, it's all based around the protein, isn't it? If fish is costing 160, let's say, well, by the time you triple that,
yes,
and then you've got your chips. It's not, you can't just add a number and be like, oh yeah, I'm making 100% margin, like you can these bowls of rice. And I'm nothing against bowls of rice. If people want to eat, if people want a carb load and never do a run for it, that's fine.
Yeah.
But for me, I think fish and chips the problem is that years ago when, let's say, cod and haddock was dead cheap, no one ever sort of tweaked their prices as we were moving up when it stopped becoming a cheap product, if that makes sense.
Yes. And like you said, I don't think people bat an eyelid when they pay for fish and chips. I certainly don't. But I would bat an eyelid and I think, am I paying like 10 quid for this meal?
Yeah.
When I could make this at home for a couple
It's
quid.
worth noting that you respect fish a lot differently to most other people.
I guess I am biased in that way. I know what you mean.
Yeah, I would be too, because if I went and paid £10 for fish and chips, I'm like, whatever. Like, there's restaurants in London that charge £26 for fish and chips, and people will buy it. So what I'm getting at is, to some people that represents good value for money.
Yes,
they're obviously wealthier than us, and they've got very good jobs, and if they're already in that type of restaurant, they're going to spend that sort of money anyway. So I think that fish and chips should always remain value for money. We shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yes, exactly.
And I think this is where, looking at other species, even if it's just on a day offer or a weekly offering, doesn't mean it has to be cheaper. Just it needs to represent great value.
Yes.
So if it's coley or pollock or hoki or hake or whatever, like you say, as long as it's sustainable,
yes,
I think there's some good. You can get more customers through the door with a cheaper offering and still maintain a good margin.
Yes.
So that's a thought anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think good value for money. You're getting a good source of protein from the fish, some nice carbs from the chips, and then some mushy peas as well.
Yeah.
And I also heard a fact. I was listening to another podcast that apparently.
How dare you?
Oh, sorry, I only listened to this one. That you can get more. I think it was more vitamin C when you fry potatoes. There's more vitamin C in a fried potato than there is in a normal potato. And people were like, "Oh my god, I can't eat chips." I bet a few chips don't hurt anyone.
I'm guessing that's probably because you've dehydrated the product, so maybe there's less water, so there's more vitamin C.
I'm not sure the science behind it, but I thought, that makes me feel better about, getting a portion of chips.
And then also, people don't realise that flowers in this country are all fortified. So you've got niacin, you've got vitamin C, it's full of vitamins. And now they've just started adding folic acid, so, everyone should be snorting batter like it's going out of fashion.
Well, each their own.
So let's move on to what could be seen as a contentious issue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
So let's look at the costs involved, like the annual audit, cost of using MSC, So annual audit, I did a bit of research, £250 to £1,000 a year. Is that right? To get the annual audit?
Is this, are you talking about fisheries or chain of custody here?
Chain of custody.
So 250,000, did you say?
No, £250 to £1,000.
Okay, so
for a fish and chip shop.
For a fish and chip shop. All right, so I'll explain
break it down
to you.
I'll
break it down for you. Okay, so we're quite unique in the UK that we offer a cheaper way to get into the programme for independent businesses.
Some would argue with that.
Well, some would argue, but let me explain. So it's essentially a group certificate, and it's an easier way to enter, more cost effective, less admin. And so we offer that through the NSSF. We don't do any of the audits, that's all done third party, so we don't have any influence on who comes into the programme. So I've got the prices here Brilliant. As well. So it can be up to, so if you're a quality award holder and a member of the NSSF, if you want to become MSC certified, that's £250.
And just for those that don't know, NSSF is National Federation of Fish
Yes.
Fries. Yeah.
The big dogs. So that, I understand it can be expensive to some, and these are very small independent businesses and they've got a lot on their plate. But if you were a business who wanted to do their own certificate and not join this group certificate, it can be onwards and upwards from £1,000 to £1,500.
Okay.
So we would say this is a significantly cheaper way to get into the programme and sort of reaping the benefits. And I completely understand it can be seen as a barrier to entry, but this is the better way of doing it for a fish and chip shop. So they're audited and their certificate lasts 3 years once they've passed.
Okay, so that fee isn't yearly then?
So that fee is yearly.
Oh, that fee is yearly, but it lasts 3 years.
Yes.
Okay.
So it lasts 3 years, and you have a surveillance audit every year. So when you first come into the programme, an assessor will come and assess your business and make sure you're adhering to the principles. So the chain of custody is just one of our 2 standards. So I mentioned earlier our fishery standard, then we have the chain of custody standard, which is a traceability and segregation standard. So that means that any product with the blue label on, if it's on the menu or in a packaged product, it means it's come from a certified sustainable fishery and is 100% traceable.
Okay.
So without that blue label, you don't actually know what you're buying or what you're getting. So they're assessed on the 5 principles within the chain of custody certification requirements. They pass, and that is all done on site. So they check, for example, that the fish is segregated. So we have to make sure that you're keeping your MSC fish and your non-MSC fish separate.
Touch each other,
they've got to be separate. No cuddling for the fish. So
I've seen that. Yeah,
they've got to be separated from non-MSC fish. They need to do things like recording the purchase of their MSC fish, checking the invoices. So that it's all labelled correctly. You know that you're purchasing from a certified supplier. So that's the first requirement, purchasing from a certified supplier. Because if you don't, then you don't actually know the fish you're getting is MSC or not.
Okay. So for example then, when you said that if it wasn't MSC, you wouldn't know where it came from.
Yeah.
Doesn't it say on the label what area it's come from and everything? Like FAOX 27, let's say, stuff like that.
Are you talking about non-labelled products here?
Yeah, non-blue label.
Yeah, so I mean, some products do have where it comes from on. But that being said, it might be from FAO 27, but you don't know who's...
I don't even know what FAO 27 is. I've just seen it in a shop.
So the world's ocean is separated into areas.
Thanks for that.
It's common sense. And I mean, you can see that your fish has been caught, in FAO 27, but how has it been caught? What sort of methods have been used, and if they're using a certain gear type, what has actually happened to the seabed, for example. But with the MSC blue label, you know that fish has come from a sustainable fishery, and that any sort of impacts they're having on the environment are reduced to as like a minimum as they can. So that's sort of the reliability with the programme.
And just so I understand it, so chain of custody means that the vessel is certified?
Yes.
Then the resellers as well?
Yes, so anyone throughout the supply chain
has to be
MSC certified.
Okay.
So anyone who wants to sell their seafood as MSC or wants to use the blue label, they must have chain of custody in place.
So if we just to break it down for our industry only, I'm not picking out names because I'm trying to, get anyone into trouble. So say, for example, the vessel you mentioned earlier was Ramon.
Yes.
They would sell, for argument's sake, to Fries Pride or Tea Quality.
Yes.
They would have to have chain of custody as well.
Yeah, so Fries Pride, Tea Quality, for example, no naming names, they've got MSC certification. Okay. So they're MSC certified.
So then the next person in the line, let's say X fish and chip shop, they want to be certified, they would do that, and then that's it. That's the whole chain.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant.
So the likes of Tea Quality and those certified suppliers, they have what we call a chain of custody number, which is a unique code, and a requirement is they put that on their invoice. And the fishery that they buy their fish from, that has a fishery certification code as well. That the suppliers need to buy from a certified fishery.
So just so I can understand.
Yeah, no, don't worry.
So if if, for example, then they bought fish from a non-MSC certified wholesaler,
Yes.
but the fish was MSC certified, what does that mean?
Okay, so that's the point where
I know we're getting a bit technical.
No, it's fine. It's good to explain it. And that's the point where we can't actually trace where that fish has come from.
Mm-hmm.
So they might say they've purchased from a certified fishery, but how do you know that? And when it gets to their sort of warehouse, for example, how do they store it? Is it just mixed in with other MSC fish or non-MSC fish? And then it's sold on to another supplier and they're like, yeah, this is MSC, but how do you know? Because they could have had a batch of non-MSC and MSC fish for all you know. But that chain of custody code and the certification ensures that throughout the supply chain that fishery is 100% traceable and certified sustainable.
Okay.
So that's the way we, keep a track of things and make sure that anyone who is using the blue label is doing so for the right reasons.
Well, you should hope they are anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And so then we move on to the blue label.
Yes.
And you did ask me earlier on about that blue label, so it was quite early on. But
I did.
We've come back round to it. So this is where there is another fee, and that is 0 to 130,000 of fish sales or purchases even is £160. And then the next one is 130 to 330,000 per annum of fish purchases, £800, and then 330,000 and onwards, £1,600. So that's the three tiers. So why isn't this more simplified? And I know you rely of all the funding, you need it obviously, and obviously you feel strongly about the blue label, but why isn't it all in? Like, why can't it be all in one? Like, to not confuse people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So to get things straight, when you're audited, you're done by a third-party certification body. So the MSC simply write the standards. We don't have any influence who comes into the programme. That's the same with fisheries and businesses alike. So we don't do the audits. It's done third party. Someone from an external company will come in and audit your business.
Yeah.
In terms of the license agreement, so the blue label, it's we want to protect it. MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, was a registered trademark, so that's where the license fee comes into play. And it's different for food service. So for fish and chips, we felt that it was another barrier to entry, and previously fish and chips were on what we call a royalty scheme.
Okay.
So they were doing 0.5% of how much seafood they were selling.
Okay.
That was MSC. So essentially, we've changed that now to more of a site. It's called a site fee structure.
Okay.
They're liable for an annual fee at start, so that depends on the amount of MSC certified seafood that they purchase, and that can start as little as £160. And then depending on the amount of sites they have, then they're liable for the site fee. So if you've got one site, you're paying £160 for the year. That's it. That's for the use of the label. We'll give you some marketing materials. We'll help you promote your certification. Any more than one site, then you do start paying the site fee. So we've made it easier for food service businesses to enter the programme and use the label. Okay.
So I was chatting to a customer of mine yesterday, and he's got 12 sites.
Yes.
And he says he just doesn't think he could ever become MSC certified because he feels, and they're all good sites, but he just feels that it's quite a large, not a burden, but a tax as such,
Yes.
And he says, look, he goes, all the fish we get is sustainable. He goes, we know it is because we know who we buy off and so on and so on. And they do have very strict controls. So I think his argument was, and also an argument of some people that do have the blue label with you, do support that scheme. They were just thinking, is it too much money? Like, and obviously, I understand why, because you've just told me earlier that it there's no government funding, and so is there an argument that says that if it was a bit cheaper and easier to get into, you'd get more shops on board?
I guess so, but like I mentioned earlier, we're an NGO. We have funding, but the majority of our income does come from the license agreement. And so that's how we sort of keep going, and how we work with more fisheries to bring new species into the programme and to work with businesses alike. So, and it helps us also develop our standards as well. So our standards are very unique, and the only ones of their kind. And if we didn't invest our time and our effort and our money into that, they would just become sort of, relaxed really. Yep. And it wouldn't become as, strict and sort of rigid and credible as it currently is. So that's why I understand that there is, with everything, there is a cost, there's a barrier to entry, but that shouldn't put people off. because people are starting to recognise the label more. And in fact, our latest studies show, let me get the figure up because I want to get this right. So we do like a consumer study every 2 years, and our latest study showed that 77% of British consumers demand independent labelling for brands and supermarket sustainability claims. So consumers want to see the blue label on menus and on packaging as well, because as I mentioned earlier, sustainability is a bit of a buzzword and it gets thrown around too much. You might say your fish is sustainable, but how do you really know?
Yeah, and I get that, but that also doesn't stop some people from just putting something on the menu that says our fish comes from sustainable sources.
Yes, no, it doesn't.
And obviously we got into it when we first met, and I was like, well, what if I do say...
I know, you were trying to start a fight with me, weren't you?
Well, and obviously I've done a bit of research and a little bit of that, and you're right, your intellectual property is solid.
Yes.
And I get that, and it has to be, because you just don't want every Tom, Dick or Harry just saying, oh yeah, we use MSC. So I think for me, I can't help but think that with prices being the way they are, I was talking to someone the other day, fish is up 30 to 35% this year, potatoes are up nearly double than last year. I worry for MSC in some respects that people would be quick, although they believe in the mission, they'd be quick to make savings. And usually things like this are the first things to go. Yeah. Do you get what I mean?
But I also don't think it should be that way, because
I agree with you.
At the end of the day, fish is the core product for fish and chips, and without fish, there's no fish and chips. So why wouldn't you want to protect the oceans for future generations?
I think they do, and but at the same time, I think they feel like they're just getting taxed a bit, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So for example, one guy says, all right, let me find this. All right, so he says he used McDonald's as an example.
Okay.
Yeah. He says McDonald's do the fillet fish. It's hoki or pollock, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think it might be pollock.
It changes, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah. So they have. I think it used to be hoki. Yeah. I think it might be pollock now.
Yeah, that's it. And it's worldwide certified, is it?
Yeah.
Yep. And he says there is no way in this world that they paid the same as what we would pro rata. He goes, they would have sat down, negotiated it. Now this is what he was saying.
Okay.
Yeah. He goes, you imagine, he goes, McDonald's, you want to sit us at the table, what are you going to do? And he goes, there's just no way they'd be paying the same. Because one thing I found afterwards is that there is I don't know if it applies to McDonald's, but there is also a product fee, isn't there? If you sell a branded product with the blue label on.
So you're only charged royalty fees if you sell a consumer-facing product.
So it wouldn't apply to the fillet of fish, or would it? I'm just wondering that.
Yeah, so it would.
So it would.
Yeah, because they're using the label on that, and they charge. I think they charge on the royalty fee.
Yeah.
But no, we don't. They don't negotiate anything with us. Our standards are very credible, and we stick to them. We don't offer something for someone and something for another person.
And again, this was just a general feeling that he feels like that the smaller independent wouldn't get to ever negotiate anything like that. And we're not about negotiating about, just say it's sustainable and we'll give you the money. Yeah. It was still sustainable, but what they're saying is he doesn't think that, he sort of thinks that if you've got a major player coming on board, you could say, you know what, rather than that annual fee of $1,600, how about we just say it's $1,000?
Yeah.
Just to negotiate to make it happen. So, and that's it's just a general feeling. Clearly, he had no proof. It wasn't some conspiracy. It was just a feeling.
Yeah, and I completely understand where they're coming from. I mean, we are quite a big organisation, and people might see us that way, but we're not a money making scheme. If we were, we would be doing, we wouldn't care about the oceans. We wouldn't have made the changes that we have done. And the impact on water is incredible. We've got 359 fisheries certified, another 89 in assessment, and that represents around 40% of the world's wild capture. And the amount of improvements these fisheries have made to make sure that their fishing is sustainable, and to make sure that, me and you, we've got fish on our plates. I mean, we can demonstrate change, and we have done, and that's where the license fees come into play. We're not here to make money. We're here to make a difference, and I can categorically say that we don't negotiate with people. Our fees are our fees.
Okay,
and they're not just used to for us. They're put into good things, awareness raising, developing our standards to make sure they're the most credible around, consumer campaigns, market development, and working with our partners as well. For example, fish and chip shops, we like to, hopefully we'll do trade shows in the future, or do campaigns, or develop materials for them so they can promote their certification to their customers, things like that. So we do reward them. They do get things in return for the cost of the label, marketing materials, press releases. We work with them where we can. So it's not just a money making scheme.
No, of course not. No one's suggesting that.
No.
But I really do think, if the powers that be sort of thought, you know what, guys, we can, let's charge a little bit less, but let's target more fish and chip shops.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely believe that you would benefit greatly. I really do think that.
So, yeah, but I mean,
again,
£160 for the year for one site. Do you think that's too extortionate?
I think it's more so when you pile it all together.
Yes.
So when you then think, everyone's sort of like putting their hand in your pocket from a fish and chip shop's point of view. For example, you've got NFFF membership. Yep. You've got this. You've got that. You've got MSC. So what you probably want more so, in my mind, is that you don't want to be optional.
Yes.
You just want people to say, it's £100.
Yeah. So before the fee structure came into place, the fish and chip shops were on the royalty scheme, and that worked out a lot more. They were paying a lot more money for their license. This is what we've done, and hopefully we can improve on it in the future. I'll take their feedback. This makes it easier for them, and it's cheaper.
And I'm not trying to set you up here. I actually don't know the answer to this. How many fish and chip shops are MSC certified?
As of yesterday, 124.
Okay, so there's 11,000 fish and chip shops roughly. I'd like to see that figure, because I think everyone that I talk to will say, I believe in their mission.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that says, no, load of crap. Like, I just don't think there is, yeah? So I just feel like if it was, I don't know, and I understand what you're saying about the annual audit, you can't bring it together because that's an outside party that does that. But I just think that if you could say, you know what, guys, even all right, so let's look at another option. So say the fee was still there, but it all went to the processor. So the top end, the person who's got the boat.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it just made its way down, like all the way down, almost like a levy, like seafood.
Okay.
And I'm not expecting you to go upstairs and get an answer right now. But like, what I'm saying is, imagine then that it just sort of became the norm.
Yes.
And I get there's issues with that because, well, how are people going to then use the blue label and so on? But I just feel like if the barrier to entry was lower, I think you'd increase your numbers tenfold, not even double. I just think it'd be great to see 1,000 fish and chip shops.
Yeah.
Say,
don't get me wrong.
Do you know what I mean?
That'd be the dream.
But I think when they're all sort of like, it's tough times out there. And I think when it's tough times, it's all the extras that end up falling by the wayside, So I'd hate to see that 120 something. Was it 120 something?
124.
Yeah. I'd hate to see that drop to 60 because it'd be awful because you guys are really trying hard to do a great job.
Yeah.
So, I want to reiterate that we really believe in your mission.
Yes.
But it's all about the numbers.
And that's why we've got plans for the future. We're going to work closely with the National Federation of Fish Fryers because they've got goals as well. They want more people MSC certified as well.
Yeah.
And so do we. So we're going to work closely with them to try and bring the numbers up. And I mean, I guess we do want to make it sort of an industry norm.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you want to do it? I mean,
exactly.
You want to protect your business, it's your livelihood. Why do you not care about the fish that you're serving? And how can you guarantee that your fish is MSC certified without the chain of custody in place? That's the whole point of it.
I get it.
I know.
I just think that many would just have, and I know it's not the most amount of money in the world. I just think that for some people it is, and it is tough times out there for some people. And I think, like I said, they're just going to say, you know what, it's 160 quid there, it's 300 quid there, it's 400 quid there. I've got, it's not like it's insurance and you have to pay insurance. I think these things are all optional, And a lot of the time, a lot of people bank on the fact that somebody else is doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, so for example, how many NFFF members are there? Well, I think Andrew said the other week, 1,400, something like that. Well, everyone else is just banking on the fact that there's those that pay the bill.
Yes.
So that's what's always going to happen. So, in actual fact, by lowering the barrier to entry, you end up it becomes fairer representation, I think, because more people then say, well, it's only this much, just whatever.
I agree.
It's just a thought.
And I think that's what we've done with the group certificate, because if we wouldn't have these numbers if we were pushing these independent shops to do their own certificate, because £1,500 is a lot of money for businesses, and we're trying our best to make it applicable for all, and that anyone can come into the programme. And I think we're getting there, working closely with the NFFF. It shouldn't be a cost, a barrier. I mean, there's so many benefits to being certified. It benefits individual businesses and also the UK fish and chip industry, and it also reinsures your customers as well, because customers, every day they're thinking, where is my food coming from? And, is it good quality? Is it sustainable? Should I be eating this? And And so, yeah, I just think it's, it's so important to do.
Well, let's move on to the next topic.
We shall.
I'll drill you down otherwise, and you get bored. You're like, yeah. So policing, it's not a big deal. This is a very quick one. So what's the general feeling? Like, if someone's using your MSC,
Yes.
and it happens, I'm guessing, the logo, what usually happens there? Like,
So, I mean...
Is it like send the big boys in, cease and
the big boy, i.e. me. I'm very scary.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. So it's quite hard. We don't have the capacity to look at every fish and chip shop in the UK and see if they're using the label. I mean, if someone said to me, my fish and chip shop's using the logo, I would be able to tell you that they're not using the logo.
It's got to be brought to your attention.
Yeah. So sometimes we do it by chance. So I've walked past a shop not far from where I live, and I'm like, what have they got that logo doing in the door? Sometimes it's just by chance.
And sometimes they don't know, I suppose. They don't know that they're not allowed to. Or do they, do you think, most time?
Bit of both. I mean, they obviously see the benefit in it because they know it's a good thing. They know it's the right thing to be doing. So why wouldn't you go through the whole process? I do sometimes think it's a little bit cheeky. We work with the NFFF on that as well. So if they see a shop using the logo and they shouldn't be, they'll pass it on to me. And sometimes we rely on the members as well. So whoever's certified, I've had shops saying to me, oh, by the way, there's a shop down the road that's saying they're MSC certified. Are they? And I'm like, no, they're not. So I usually get in contact with them, explain that, the MSC is a registered trademark, and so is the label. And if you haven't undergone chain of custody or signed a license agreement, then you can't use the logo. And from there, that hopefully turns conversations round into, have you ever thought about being certified? Do you know the benefits of it? Do you know how easy it is as well? And, it is quite easy. It's relatively simple.
So rather than trying to get them to stop using it, although that's the goal, you're actually trying to get them to become...
Yeah, so it's a bit of education.
Yeah, a bit of both.
So obviously we want them to stop until they've got the right things in place.
Yeah.
And so we can educate them and say, look, this is something you could be doing. How about we have a chat?
Yeah, because one of my mates who's got a shop, they were saying that they've got MSC certification and they love it. And they were saying, but it annoys them that the shop down the road talks about the fact that they've got it.
Yes.
And they haven't.
Well, that's when they can come to us and say, this is not right. What will you do about it? And we will do something about it, because it completely devalues the programme for others, because all those 124 shops which have gone through the process, they've had to change the way they work sometimes, and they put a big investment into it. Like you said, it's not cheap, nor is it majorly expensive, but they put time in it, they put money into it, they put admin into it.
Yep.
Why would they want someone from down the road to completely discredit what they've been doing? And I completely understand their frustration. Yep. So wherever possible, we advise people to come to us and say, be a bit of a snitch, which it's fine.
And what are the biggest risks do you see to whether it's the seafood industry, the oceans? What's your biggest concern, whether it's personal or whether it's the opinion of the MSC? What's your biggest concern?
I mean, first and foremost, our concerns is overfishing. So they say reports have shown that overfishing has tripled in the past 40 years.
Okay.
And that's particularly important considering over 1 billion people rely on fish as their main source of protein.
So when you say overfishing,
yes,
are we talking about people
fishing beyond sustainable?
Okay.
So we define sustainability as they can continue fishing indefinitely at a level which is manageable, and fish stocks remain healthy and viable. If they're overfishing, they're basically taking out more than they should do, and that population can't keep up. They can't reproduce in time. So when you do try and go back and fish in that area, there's probably nothing there, because the babies haven't grown.
I always thought that was classed as like blackfish. That was the terminology for that. Or can you still sell it normally?
Sell what?
When it's overfished fish, like, can you still sell it as normal? Just take it to the market and off you go? Like,
I mean, there's some very unsustainable fish on fish markets.
Okay.
But people buy it.
Yeah. Well, they wouldn't know, would they?
They might know, but they might think it's tasty.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully they don't know, and if they did know, they wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, if they're hungry.
Yeah.
So okay then. So you think the biggest risks are that?
So I mean, that's just one of the risks.
Yeah,
so for the MSC, it's overfishing.
Yeah.
In my personal opinion, you've got the sort of climate change and global warming. So the ocean temperature is rising, and that essentially, affects the coral reefs and the ecosystems that live within the ocean. And then you've got ocean acidification. So carbon dioxide is being absorbed into the water, and that changes the pH level in the water. And that means coral reefs are dying, and ecosystems which live in those coral reefs are also, going extinct as well.
Yeah.
So I'd say we've got overfishing, you've got, global warming, ocean acidification. There's a pollution as well. Industrial process, they just chuck things into the water and they don't really care where it goes. You've got ships as well who are dumping, oil spills. And then there's also the plastics in the ocean. I think we've got a lot to worry about and we've got a lot to do to change it as well.
Sounds like a very bright future there.
Yeah, well,
no, but exactly. You're just aware of what it is.
Yeah,
and,
I think we all should be as well. I mean, thank goodness for David Attenborough for bringing the plastics to light, but that was going on years ago, and people didn't realise.
Yeah, I just think it's been lingering for a long time. I think that
we needed that sort of bang.
Yeah, again, we shouldn't. I think we shouldn't have to need that kick up the bum, but we do. And but again, if everyone is just, if it's great, if it starts at the top with legislation and it starts at the bottom with just common sense, then it just all works itself out. Hopefully, but. Yeah, plastics being dumped in the ocean that's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So when we did our consumer research for consumers, plastics in the ocean is their biggest threat. They think they're concerned about that threat to the ocean. Then there's overfishing as the second one as well. So I think plastics.
Consumers are strange people though. They worry about something they can't see, but then throw rubbish out the car. So the same person that's afraid of or worries about the ocean will fly tip. So consumers are strange beings, and they do sort of move from one fad to another. So, but I just think that the oceans and the land should just be sacred, like sacrosanct.
People don't realise how much we rely on the ocean, for the fishing. It takes in carbon dioxide for us. I don't know when it's all gonna, come to light, but it's just about educating people, and that's what I try and do as well in like a personal capacity. If my friends, if they maybe using a coffee cup, I'm like, maybe just get yourself a reusable one. Try and if you can make the difference. I mean, it's hard though because you want to try and do something for the environment, but it needs to be a big group of people.
I think it's worth noting that again, like if you are at McDonald's, for argument's sake, and you have a drink, they've got a closed loop system, and I think most people would know that they've got that sort of system in place. Because same with Starbucks. Anything that gets drunk there and gets recycled there is perfect because it goes through the system. They get it done right.
Yes.
The problem is when people take rubbish home or it enters general waste in the street. And I think that's half the problem, that people aren't aware of what happens to rubbish there. That's my opinion. It's nothing. None of that is fact. It's just an opinion. I think that everyone could do better collectively. But I think, it all needs to come from the top. So there's one question that I didn't touch on, and I hope you don't mind me bringing it up, because it's not on the list at all.
Ooh.
But what about, again, if it has to be your opinion, that's fine. What about mercury? Is that still a thing? Like mercury in fish? That I read something ages ago, and it just keeps regurgitating sometimes around the internet about mercury in fish. Like
again, I've read things about that as well. But there's also the issue of plastic in fish as well. So when I was at university, my supervisor did a study, and it was looking at trophic level transfer of plastic. So he had some mussels in a tank, and he was feeding them microplastics. In fact, after a certain period of time, he was dissecting the mussel meat, seeing there was plastic in there, but then he was feeding that to crabs, and then eventually dissecting the crab meat, and he could find the plastic in the crab meat, which is really scary. And
that's a woman problem, I tell you. I'm not even being sexist. That's exfoliators. Yeah, men do use exfoliators now, don't they?
But it's also your plastic as well. Your skin's looking great. I think you've been using something.
Bamboo exfoliator. Yeah. Listen to me. But no, I think that's half the problem sometimes. That a lot of those, and I think facial creams and stuff like that, toothpaste, they're all starting to get a lot better now, aren't they?
Yeah.
So hopefully that this microplastics, I think, wasn't there a motion to ban it all or something?
Yeah, I think, I used to use an exfoliator, which did have sort of microbeads in it, and there's been a ban put in place, I think, that there isn't the plastic microbeads in there now. And when I went back to get that exfoliator, I was like, the packaging's changed. Because we've changed the formula. It's no longer plastic, and plastic beads. I was like, oh, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of time people do it without, you use it without knowing. And it's not, who's to know? You pick it up, it's good for your skin, and you move on. But you're right. I didn't realise that again, it's going to happen. It's going to go from species to species, isn't it? Because you've got predators that eat the prey, and off it goes. So it is going to end up in the larger fish, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's
or
scary.
End up in us in the end as well.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to know about that.
No, let's not talk about that one.
What plans have MSC got in the future? Anything exciting happening? Anything you can talk about yet, or is it all a bit too soon? Anything in the pipeline?
So we're currently going through our fishery standard review. So we do that every 5 years. I mentioned earlier we welcome input from stakeholders in industry, if they're raising concerns or voicing, worries, and that we take that into account, and that reflects our changes in our standards. So we try and keep on top of the time. So it reflects our best practice, essentially. So we're going through that at the moment. In terms of fish and chips, so we're looking at doing more trade shows this year, so you'll see us about a bit more, which is really excited. So if you see us, come along and chat to us. And we're happy to talk about all things sustainable seafood, and working with the NFFF as well to develop the number of MSC certified chippies and also QA holders as well, because I think those should be industry standards as well. And I mean, it's not about saying you do something, it's about proving you do it as well, and backing that up as well. And I think that's really important.
Fantastic. And then, so tomorrow, as we know, are the Fish and Chip Awards.
Yes.
And how important do you feel they are?
I think they are wonderful. I mean, so my first awards were last year, the Fish and Chip Awards. I didn't really understand what the hell was going on. I was like, is this a thing? It is a thing, and it should be a thing. And it celebrates all things fish and chips, and what a wonderful, amazing dish it is, and the wonderful industry that we get to work in, me and you. And I think it's a celebration, and it should be. And it's good to celebrate, people's practices, the best shops in the UK, and the ones that are being the most sustainable, the ones that are using the best quality potatoes and the most sustainable potatoes. And I think it covers a wide range of, there's obviously a lot of awards, and I think it should do. And I think people should be, know about these things more.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I just don't understand why more people don't enter every year. I really think more should enter.
Yeah. Because you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you, really?
Well, definitely, yeah.
I mean, that's obvious. But, last year, out of the 16 awards, 12 of them were MSC certified.
Yeah.
So that's 75%. And I think some chippies have said to us that they think being MSC certified helps them in the awards as well, because it shows to the judges that we're doing the right thing, and we're practicing the best that we can and proving that we are sustainable with the chain of custody in place. So I'm not saying you need to be MSC certified to win, but as an industry standard, it should be something you should consider.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And you guys sponsor an award as well?
So we do. So we co-sponsor the Good Catch Award, which is the Sustainable Sourcing Award, which is completely to do with fish. And we co-sponsor that with the Marine Conservation Society. So the other MCS, MMC, I don't know. So we co-sponsor them with that. And we had some very, very strong applicants this year, as we have done in the previous years.
Are you going to tell us who won now? Because
no.
Well, this will be out in a few days. You can just say congratulations.
I could do, but I don't want you to know.
like anybody listens to me.
You'll have to check the news.
No, so and what does that involve? That award then? Just obviously, chain of custody is obviously the first prerequisite.
Yes. Yeah. So that's probably one of the key things, and then it's about how they're sourcing their seafood. So are they also looking at the MCS guidelines? So what colour rated their fish is? Are they checking sort of the red rated list? Do they know that fish is in a good state at the moment? Do they know how their fish is caught? Is it caught in a certain part of the ocean with a certain gear type? And how they communicate to the customers as well. So are they MSC certified? Are they using the label? Are they educating their staff, their customers as well? And one of our new questions this year was to talk about plastics, obviously because the MCS do cover that. And one of the questions was how are they reducing their single-use plastics within store? And we had some really strong answers and some very strong applicants, so it's very tough to judge, but very strong as well. And the top 4 shortlisted just reflect the best in the industry, and they really do care about sustainability. But I encourage people to apply for these awards because think of the PR around it, and you've worked so hard for it as well. Why not celebrate that you're doing the right thing?
Of course, that makes complete sense. Well, like you say, you've got to be in it to win it, haven't you?
Yeah, and with the Good Catch Award as well, it's all about. So we're promoting fish for future generations, and that's our vision is the ocean's teeming with life. So we want fish for future generations, and so should you and Joe down the road as well.
I'm conscious of time.
Oh, am I chatting too much?
No. I just don't want to keep you busy. I know you're busy, so I don't want to keep you, but I just thought of one question as you were talking.
Okay.
And it's because you're really open and honest, and I'm really sort of like I'm thinking of things on the fly. And
go for it.
And is it true that if there is no data on a fish's abundance or lack of abundance, that it would automatically be classed as not sustainable?
If I'm honest, I'm not too sure.
And I don't know if that's your remit or MCS. I don't know.
No,
but-
so I mean, so I mentioned earlier our fisheries improvement projects, and for some of the UK fisheries, they have actions put on them to improve their practices, and one of them is sort of catch data. So obviously, our first criteria in the fisheries standard is sustainability. So are they fishing sustainably? And without that data, then how do you know? So that data probably is a requirement for our standard. So we know how much is in the ocean, because then how can we tell if they're sustainable? If they're fishing at a level which is too quick for the fish to grow up and become big again, then how do we know? So we need that sort of data, and the industry works hard to gather that, but it is a hard job and it does take a while.
Yeah. It's not just as easy as going out and having a quick look. Oh,
no.
Yeah, there's quite a few there, look.
There is quite a few there. It's very complex. Fishery science is very complex, but I admire the people who do it, because without them we wouldn't have the knowledge and the data that we do have today, and all the fisheries that are in the programme.
Well, not all heroes wear capes, do they?
No, exactly.
No. So, well, in this case, they probably wear...
They wear overalls.
Overalls, wellies.
I love a pair of waders, I must add. I feel very comfortable in them.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, look, Loren, I want to wrap this up, and excuse the pun. And I just want to say thanks for your time. Thanks for your honesty.
No worries.
I think, we've gone through quite a fair bit, and you've been really open about everything. And you didn't say I couldn't ask anything, and you've answered absolutely everything, I think. I can't see anything on the list that I've not asked.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been really excited to do this. And, if anyone ever has any questions about MSC, get in contact with us. We're more than happy to answer any questions.
And people can follow MSC on Twitter and Facebook.
Yep, so we're at MSC in the UK. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Get us on our website, www.msc.org/UK. That's our UK-focused website. Send us an email. Any questions, I'm happy to chat through them with you. And long live fish and chips, I say.
That's what I say.
And long live fish.
Long live fish.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not quite, because you want to eat it. But
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean.
I know, I get the gist, yeah. Well, thanks, Loren, and we'll get wrapped up now.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me. See you later.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to episode 7. I just want to say one last time, I think she deserves it. I just want to say well done to Loren. She was just really open and honest, and I really appreciate that. Even if we weren't on the right side of the conversation, I think that she had her points and I had mine, and maybe it'll be good. You guys need to lean in with your opinion now. I really do think it'll be good to get Loren on in the future. And again, I think that she can keep us updated about, the oceans and the topics that they deal with daily. If you could share this podcast with anyone you think that would like it, and whilst you're there, share it on all social platforms. May as well, hey? For regular updates, it's worth subscribing on your favourite podcast channel. Thank you.